Welcome back to our channel, where we provide updates and undisclosed narratives on Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. We provide you with the exciting news: William heartbroken after royal investigator just reopened Diana's case and exposed Camilla's darkest secret. More than 30 years after the world grieved the loss of Diana, Princess of Wales, the British monarchy had a problem in the fall of 2025. This disaster put the carefully planned account of its recent past in danger. It wasn't a political mistake or a public controversy that set things off. It was a little parcel shipped from Paris. The materials, a collection of well-written papers claiming a conspiracy regarding Diana's dying hours, forced people to think about the past, which led to a big police inquiry and an extraordinary fight between a monarch and his successor. This is a sad story of how one person's problems nearly tore the House of Windsor apart, and how a father and son made up after a fake scandal. The Parisian News. The story begins in the middle of October, when the old stones of London appear to hold the cold of the North Atlantic. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has just gotten back to Kensington Palace following a long but successful trip to Boston for the Earthshot Prize presentation. The environmental project, which was a big part of his public life, gave him a feeling of purpose and a goal for the future that was quite different from the sad memories of his family's history. Thomas, the prince's longtime servant, greeted him as he entered the warm, familiar space of his own chambers. The family photos on the walls were as important to the home as Thomas's hard work. He had a bundle in his hands that was about the same size as a thick folio and was wrapped in simple brown paper. The only thing that stood out was a bunch of Paris postmarks and a big red wax seal with a strange symbol on it. "Sir, this came while you were gone," Thomas replied, his voice showing a trace of worry. "It has been through a full security check. There is no imminent danger, but we don't know where it came from. Paris." William didn't see the name of the city as a sign of culture and enlightenment. Instead, he regarded it as a constant reminder of the darkness that came with August 31st, 1997. His mother died in the crumpled wreckage of a Mercedes in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in this city. The envelope had just one phrase written on it in beautiful, careful handwriting: "For the son who deserves to know the truth about his mother." Someone who worked for the prince subsequently remarked that the mood was immediately charged. William felt a mix of fear and strong, unending interest as he entered his private study with the gift. At least in a technical sense, the details of his mother's death had been resolved for years. The Metropolitan Police's 2004 Operation Pageant inquiry found that her death was the consequence of a terrible accident caused by a careless drunk motorist and the chase of photographers. But conspiracy ideas have stayed around with murmurs that won't go away. William shattered the wax seal while gazing at a portrait of his mother on the wall. Her eyes seemed to embody a vitality that had been mercilessly extinguished. He uncovered a pile of papers that seemed yellowed and aged like documents from decades past. The letterhead of Hôpital de la Pitié-Salpêtrière, the Paris hospital where Diana was pronounced deceased, was embossed on them. He examined the documents, which were a mixture of printed French medical terminology and handwritten annotations. His gaze was captivated by a single alarming paragraph purportedly from an early medical report: "Stab wound 4 cm deep right abdomen. Incompatible with vehicular impact. 4 cm deep puncture hole in the right abdominal region, inconsistent with the crash of an automobile." For a while, it seemed as if the world had ceased to progress. He experienced a surge of vertigo. Personnel at the residence reported hearing a subdued cry emanating from the study. The article did not characterize it as a catastrophic accident. It described it as an assassination, a premeditated act of homicide. This indicated that the official narrative endorsed by his family and instilled in him was false. He recalled several memories, some very vivid and others fragmented. The perplexing news he received at Balmoral: the lengthy summer parade through the streets of London, during which he and his brother were prohibited from seeing the coffin, and his father's resolute but kind rejection, which he said was to maintain her serene visage. Suddenly, another document emerged from the file. The document was a reproduction of an order purportedly issued by the office of the Prince of Wales in 1997, during the lifetime of his father, King Charles Roman III. It included a definitive directive procedure Santiu. No more tests were to be conducted. All operations have ceased. No more examinations. A little distinct parcel was located behind it with a statement in large red characters that said, "Do not trust what is buried with her." The combination was abysmal. The inference was clear. His father was not only aware of the alleged injuries, but also actively obstructed any investigation into them. The grief that had been meticulously suppressed for a lifetime was obliterated. The prince collapsed into his chair, overwhelmed with astonishment, betrayal, and sorrow. Once again, the servant heard the commotion and rushed in to find the heir to the throne pallid and struggling to breathe. This prompted a subtle but pressing summons to the royal physician. Within the palace, the enigma of the box was unveiled, and a crisis had begun. The palace division. Kensington Palace remained bustling late at night, despite London's slumber. Prince William, now composed, sat in his study with the file displayed before him like a military decree. He read it with the cold determination of a man seeking an opponent. The documents were said to be a reproduction of a report authored by Dr. Clerk, accompanied by vague annotations in the margins indicating the need for a more comprehensive forensic examination. At the bottom, there was the directive to cease all activities. It had a signature that elicited a chilling sensation. Charles, Prince of Wales, why would he wish to conceal this? A source said that William informed his wife, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, later that evening. Despite her death, he retained control over the narrative. Catherine, the prince's most trusted counsel and a pragmatist, cautioned him to exercise caution. She reportedly informed Will, "This could be anything, a trick, a cruel joke. We must ascertain its authenticity before initiating a conflict. Do not permit the past to dominate the present." Her comments were a beacon of reason among his many challenges. However, the seed of doubt was sown in rich soil, flourishing throughout the years of unaddressed grief and the intricate relationship he maintained with his father. Simultaneously, the package had initiated a formal investigation. The Royalty and Specialist Protection Command of the Metropolitan Police escalated the case to the highest echelons. Detective Chief Inspector David Kemp, a seasoned royal security expert recognized for his steadfast discretion and sharp intelligence, received the case file titled Operation Dovecote. Kemp, an individual who has encountered a spectrum of experiences ranging from genuine terrorism, threats to bizarre stalking schemes, first harbored uncertainty. He started the gradual process of examining items in his modest office at Scotland Yard, which reek of stale coffee and documents. He was overheard murmuring to a junior officer, "Something is amiss. The document is exceptional, and the aging is executed proficiently. The wax seal is unique. The Montmartre postmark is authentic. However, the file code PS 2139 is absent from any accessible official archives of the PTA cemetery. This is either the most well-concealed secret in 28 years or an exceedingly convincing forgery." Kemp's team promptly contacted Interpol and French authorities to seek access to confidential material from 1997. The request was sensitive and required diplomatic channels, eliciting scrutiny in both London and Paris. Kemp's research proceeded with clinical accuracy, whereas William opted for a more direct and significantly perilous approach. The subsequent morning he drove to Clarence House unannounced. Those few witnesses to the altercation will remember it as one of the most remarkable familial disputes in royal history. He saw King Charles Roman III and Queen Camilla in his study. Initially, the atmosphere was amicable, albeit unexpected. Nevertheless, as soon as William started, it became frosty. William said, "I received a file from Paris." His voice strained with concealed rage. It mentioned an incision on Mother's body that was not a result of the collision. "It states that you instructed them to cease the exam. I want to understand the rationale." King Charles was astonished, his expression reflecting a weariness that was all too familiar. A knowledgeable individual said that he attempted to avoid the contact. William Why raised this matter at this juncture? The problem was settled long ago. Was it? William said, his voice escalating. Or was it interred? Did you prevent her from joining us due to concealing information from someone? Queen Camilla articulated her thoughts, her tone subdued but emphatic. William, you must understand that certain matters are better left to the past, since revisiting them merely exacerbates the situation. The prince confronted her, and his sorrow and fury coalesced into a singular, piercing intensity, whose anguish his or the woman whose position you assumed. The remark lingered ominously, like a venomous dart striking at the heart of the family's most distressing moment. Camilla became pale. Charles smashed his fist on a nearby table, shattering a porcelain teacup. His countenance was ashen. That is sufficient, proceed, the king said, his voice trembling with a blend of fury and anguish. I acted to ensure the safety of you and Harry as well as to protect the monarchy. If some truths were revealed, they would strip away the last vestiges of our dignity. Please refrain from compelling me to do this action. William, weeping, exited the room, leaving his father and stepmother to address the chaos that had ensued. The chasm between the king and his son had never been so pronounced. The apparitions of Paris. 3 days later, Prince William flew to Paris ostensibly to do follow-up activities for the Earthshot Prize. DCI Kemp accompanied him, believing it essential to conduct an on-site inquiry. The city they saw was shrouded in a damp gray fog, creating an ideal backdrop. Their melancholic excursion into the past. The first location they visited was the Pitier-Salpêtrie Hospital. A semi-retired nurse named Monique Desson, rather than an official, welcomed them. Her silver hair was neatly arranged, perhaps in the manner she had maintained throughout her life. On the night of August 31st, 1997, she was employed in the emergency department. Upon encountering William, her professional composure faltered. She said softly, "You possess your mother's eyes as tears welled in her own eyes. I can vividly recall that night. The chaos, the urgency." Kemp facilitated the discussion amicably. "We are investigating an anonymous allegation. Could you elucidate the events of that night?" Monique's brow furrowed as she recalled. All the cameras in the ER hallway malfunctioned for approximately 20 minutes, attributed to a technical issue. Subsequently, upon her death, we received stringent instructions from an individual at the British Embassy, prohibiting any communication. No information or details were permitted, citing royal etiquette and national security concerns. Did anybody mention an injury that was inconsistent with the crash? Kemp exerted pressure. She vigorously shook her head. No, never. All of her injuries were severe and seemed to have resulted from a high-velocity collision. The devastation inside was catastrophic. We exerted ourselves for hours. Although it was futile, no stab mark was present. I would have observed it. Everyone would have. Her assertion significantly undermined the document's credibility. Nonetheless, the halted procedure conundrum persisted. Their subsequent destination was the funeral home in the 13th arrondissement, where Diana's remains had been prepared for repatriation to the UK. Claude Dubois, the manager, vividly remembers the event. It was an exceedingly peculiar situation, he said, his silver mustache quivering as he spoke. The coffin was a bespoke order originating from the UK. It was lined with lead, a standard practice for international repatriation to prevent leakage and degradation. Subsequently, they instructed him to weld it shut. The entire structure was sealed with a silver-based solder. We were apprised that the British authorities made a specific request referencing health regulations and the imperative to uphold royal dignity. Did it seem excessive? William inquired in a subdued tone. Claude said, "In my 40 years in this industry, I've never witnessed it executed in such a manner. However, the orders were transmitted through diplomatic channels. We believed it was to ensure that no one, particularly the press, could access or photograph the deceased individual. It was for security purposes." Kemp received a call from his team in London as they left the funeral home. "Sir, we have identified a potential sender. The parcel originated from a small office in MMA. Surveillance footage captured a woman in her mid-30s, wearing a black hat and sunglasses. She made the payment in cash and utilized a fictitious identity. We are currently conducting facial recognition analysis." The net was tightening, but not around a clandestine faction of state-sponsored assassins. As truth emerged, it revealed a much more mundane, and in its own way more tragic situation. The monarch's acknowledgement. King Charles confronted his own specters, while William sought them in Paris. The altercation with his son had profoundly unsettled him. prompting recollections of a night he had endeavored to erase for nearly 3 decades. DCI Kemp's report, containing initial findings from Paris, lay on his desk at Clarence's house. It confirmed the absence of a stab wound. However, uncertainties concerning the sealed casket and the directive to halt the procedure persisted. That evening, Charles summoned Catherine, the Princess of Wales, to his office. This unusual action indicated his distress and revealed his recognition of her role as the family's primary mediator. "William believes I am involved in a conspiracy," Charles said, his voice laden with unexpressed burdens. "He suspects that I concealed his mother's remains from him out of guilt or malevolence." Catherine awaited her opportunity to address the assembly. "Your Majesty, he is once more engulfed in his melancholy. He is aware that the coffin was sealed and that he saw your name on a document instructing everyone to be silent. You must convey the truth to him." Charles averted his gaze and observed the London skyline as it dimmed. He recounted the events of that night in Paris for the first time with utter candor. He mentioned boarding a Royal Air Force aircraft to Paris, and his thoughts were filled with astonishment and confusion. He described the sterile antiseptic corridors of the PTA cemetery, and the day when he was shown to the room where Diana was resting. "She appeared serene," he said, his voice faltering. However, the serenity was merely a facade. The incident had irrevocably shattered her. Numerous injuries were evident. Doctors had exerted their utmost efforts to present her favorably, yet the devastation remained apparent. I knelt beside her bed and pledged my devotion not as a prince, but as the father of her children. I assured her that I would return her home with the dignity she merited. He stated that he personally placed the royal standard over her remains. He indicated that this moment prompted his decision to seal the casket. The official rationale provided was adherence to international health and safety regulations, standard for a body being repatriated without full embalming. Nevertheless, his personal motive was to safeguard his father. "I had seen her," he said, his eyes brimming with sorrow, "and I was acutely aware that I could not permit William and Harry to witness her in that condition. They were only children. Their last recollection of their mother included her smile, her warmth, and her existence, not the stark, tangible reality that she has passed away. I choose to retain the pleasant memory rather than the unpleasant reality." The halted procedure was only an instruction to cease any unnecessary invasive procedures required to ascertain her condition and prepare her for her return trip. It was an act of benevolence, not concealment. He had already lost Diana due to a broken marriage and the incessant scrutiny of the media. He wanted for his son's last cherished recollection of her to not be the somber reality in that Paris hospital room. He said softly, "Silence is not invariably deceitful, Catherine. At times it is the most affectionate action one can undertake." The obsession of Eleanor Hughes. 1 week later, the last component of the puzzle fell into position. Eleanor Hughes, a 34-year-old psychology researcher from Manchester, was employed at the Montmartre post office. She was neither a spy nor a political dissident. Rather, she was a woman whose academic fascination with trauma had evolved into an excessive obsession. Hughes participated as a volunteer for a mental health charity at a royal event in 2021. She attempted to discuss with Prince William research she had conducted on the enduring effects of parental loss without assistance. She became fixated after being courteously but firmly rejected by his security personnel. She grew convinced that William was imprisoned due to a royal conspiracy and that it was her responsibility to liberate him. Upon searching her modest flat in the suburbs, Greater Manchester Police uncovered what they termed a shrine to a fantasy. The walls were adorned with a chaotic assemblage of images and news items pertaining to Diana. The bookshelves were overcrowded with biographies. Investigators uncovered the tools she used for deception on her desk: a premium laser printer, stacks of vintage paper acquired from flea markets, and a self-fabricated stamp to counterfeit the PTA Salpatry logo. The primary component of her operation was an official publicly available copy of the 2004 Patent Medical Report. She had digitally manipulated segments of the text with sophisticated editing tools, including the statement on force and for a knife wound. She then printed it on aged paper to enhance her elaborate deception. Eleanor Hughes wept and divulged the whole truth in a vividly illuminated questioning chamber. "I accomplished it for him," she said, her rationale regrettably distorted. "I admire Prince William for his strength, although I believed he was concealing the truth. The royal family obscured the circumstances surrounding his mother's death. I felt compelled to provide evidence to confront the pain I suspected he was suppressing. She had no intention to harm anybody. She was only profoundly and erroneously misguided. She saw herself as the prince's liberator, seeing the act of forgery not as a transgression, but as a means to emancipate him psychologically. That night, the BBC broadcast a special program produced with assistance from Buckingham Palace and the Metropolitan Police. DCI Kemp, his expression, a facade of grim authority, presented the facts. The Metropolitan Police affirmed that there is no evidence indicating that Diana, Princess of Wales, sustained any injuries apart from those incurred in the tragic car accident of 1997. The casket was sealed in accordance with international shipping regulations and, importantly, at the private request of the then Prince of Wales to alleviate further distress for his children. This lacked a narrative structure. It was action undertaken by a parent motivated by affection. The news spread rapidly around the globe. Headlines initially proclaiming royal murder plot were swiftly altered to Diana's secret revealed no plot, just a father's pain. The narrative then shifted to the tragic and peculiar case of Eleanor Hughes, an obsessive fantasist who had snared the princess with a printer and a fabrication. Reconciliation. On the following day, Prince William traversed the private gardens alone as sunlight illuminated the medieval walls of Windsor Castle. He had the official Operation Dovecote report, which corroborated Kemp's assertions made on television. He saw his father next to the Princess Diana statue in the sunken garden. The bronze statue of her, surrounded by children, seemed to radiate a gentle warmth in the autumn light. King Charles seemed more aged and fragile, donning a commonplace tweed coat rather than regal attire. Charles responded in a composed and articulate manner. I have dedicated my life to the belief that the honor of the crown is paramount. I now recognize that honor cannot mend a wound. It merely conceals the scar. William stopped before him. The anger he had experienced during the last week had dissipated, replaced with profound, agonizing sorrow. I believed you had interred a secret with her, he said, his voice laden with grief. I now comprehend that your concealed apprehension was the belief that the reality of her demise would overwhelm us. Charles gestured towards a stone bench for William to sit beside him. What I desired most, the king said, was for you and Harry to recall the woman, not the emblem, to focus on her laughter rather than her scars. The sole method I deemed effective to preserve that memory was to secure the casket. I executed it in a hasty, discreet manner to ensure your safety. William grasped the report. He examined the cold, clinical, and reassuringly normal findings. Death due to internal injuries consistent with a high-speed automobile collision. The 4 cm stab wound was a product of a disturbed psyche. The relief was as profound as the initial shock had been. Mother, he murmured the word constricting in his throat as tears cascaded down his cheeks. In that moment, he was not a prince, but a son who comprehended the profound anguish of his father's choice. Charles rose and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. He remarked, "The crown is a formidable burden, William. While gazing at the statue of Diana, it is laden not only with gold and jewels, but also with the memories of those who sacrificed their lives for it. Your mother relinquished much. I will not permit you to shoulder this weight alone for much longer. I intend to abdicate sooner than anticipated. You will govern with the heart she bestowed upon you." Father and son stood side by side as the light diminished. William dried his tears and embraced his father. This embrace encapsulated years of perplexity and unexpressed sorrow. In the twilight, the silhouettes of the 2 men and the statue merged, becoming 3 figures. Ultimately, there was no concealment regarding Diana's casket. It was not a clandestine governmental scheme. Rather, it was a straightforward, poignant act of love by a parent safeguarding his children amidst a realm rife with power, politics, and intrigue. The most significant truth was also the most elementary, a tale of human sorrow, paternal protection, and enduring forgiveness. The monarchy had been unsettled, yet a family began to heal. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts and goodbye for now.